I'm reading to you from The Sun, a biography. And we're going to read from chapter 14. We're all the way to chapter 14 now. The Sun King. And when he was 15, Louis the 14th of France danced the part of Apollo at Versailles, for the Le Ballet Royal de la Nuit. He had sun emblems on his shoes, his garters, his girdle, tunic, and sleeves. From his crown shone the rays of the sun, as he, with appropriate royal dignity, displayed his glitteringly golden costume. Louis XIV went on to the longest reign in European history, 1643 to 7. During his time, he brought absolute monarchy to its height, established a glittering court at Versailles, and fought most of the other European countries in 4 wars. The early part of his reign was dominated by the chief minister Cardinal Mazarin. In the middle period, Louis reigned personally and innovatively, but in the last years of his personal rule were beset by problems. He was born at the Royal Chateau in Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1638. On the death of his father, he became king at the age of only 5. The regency, confided to his mother, Anne of Austria, was marked by a period of rebellion known as the Fronde, led first by the nobility and later by the urban poor. Louis felt both humiliated by arrogant nobles and threatened by the people of Paris, and would never forget it. In 1660, he married Maria Theresa, Infanta of Spain. The following year, on the death of his godfather and prime minister, Cardinal Mazarin, the 23-year-old monarch announced that he himself would govern. No one believed him. Yet he insisted on convening a council on a daily basis, from which he excluded grand nobles, surrounded himself instead with ministers who owed him everything. The first 20 years of the king's personal reign were the most brilliant. With his minister Colbert, he carried out the administrative and financial reorganization of the kingdom, as well as the development of trade and manufacturing. With the Marquis de Louvois, he reformed the army and achieved many military victories. Finally, he encouraged. I lost my spot. Finally, he encouraged an extraordinary blossoming of culture: drama, Molière and Racine; music, Lully; architecture, painting, sculpture, and all the sciences, including the founding of the Royal Academies. These accomplishments would be depicted on the ceiling of his grand palace in Versailles. Louis chose the sun as his emblem. It was associated with Apollo, god of peace and arts, and was also seen as the heavenly body that gave life to all things, regulating everything as it rose and set. Like Apollo, Louis XIV brought peace, was a patron of the arts, and dispensed his bounty. Throughout Versailles, the decoration combines images and attributes of Apollo: laurel, lyre, tripod, or lyre, tripod, I'm not sure, Lyre, with the king's portraits and emblems: the double LL, the royal crown, the scepter, and the hand of justice. The path of the sun is also traced in the layout of the gardens. The story of Apollo governs the statues and fountains along the main axis of the gardens at Versailles. The lake at the western end is adorned by Apollo rising with his 4-horsed chariot from the waves at dawn, beginning his daily path. Nearer to the chateau is Apollo's mother, Latona. At the end of the central fountain, nearer to the chateau is Apollo's mother, Latona, at the end of the central fountain. The cycle terminated in the Grotto of Thetis, where the north wing now stands. It showed the god being tended by nymphs in the evening, as depicted in Francois Girardon's masterpiece. Okay, so that's some context. Missing Sunspots is the title of the next section. Something peculiar happened to the sun during the reign of the Sun King. As we have intimated, but now must cover in more detail, in 1826, the German amateur astronomer and pharmacist Samuel Heinrich Schwabe, 1789 to 1875 was his life, set himself the task of discovering intramercurial planets, whose existence had been conjectured for centuries. His first telescope, had been won in a lottery, but he later bought a more powerful one from Joseph von Fraunhofer. Like many before him, he realized that his best chances of detecting such planets lay when they transited the sun, but the main difficulty was the problem of confusing such planets with small sunspots. So Schwabe began meticulously recording the position of any sunspot visible on the solar disk on any day the weather would allow. In 1843, after 17 years of observation, and having sold the family business, he had not found a single intramercurial planet, but had discovered something else. He found a cyclic increase and decrease over time of the number of sunspots visible on the sun. A solar cycle with a period that he originally estimated to be 10 years. At first, many did not believe him, but in 1852, within a year of the publication of Schwabe's results in a book called Cosmos, the Irish astronomer and explorer Edward Sabine, 1788 to 1883, announced that the sunspot cycle was the same as that of the fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, for which reliable data had been accumulated since the mid-1830s. But how could such a cycle have gone unnoticed? Slowly, Schwabe's discovery gained recognition, and others wondered if the cycle could be traced farther back in the past using historical observations. Rudolf Wolf, 1816 to 1893, undertook the daunting task of comparing sunspot observations carried out by different astronomers using various instruments and observing techniques. We have a visitor. Hello, visitor. Hello. Hi. Chappy, Chappy. 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 Yes, you want some attention. Well, I'll give you some attention when I'm done reading. Wolf's interest in sunspots. Oh, and Chappy, don't bite Devin, especially if he's trying to sleep. Wolf's interest in sunspots had started when he saw a particularly large group in December 1847. Thereafter, he was to observe the sun almost daily for 46 years. To help him, he defined the relative sunspot number, which is still in use by many astronomers today. By 1868, he had a more or less reliable sunspot number back to 1745 and pushed his reconstruction all the way back to 1610. Although the paucity of data, that means the lack of data, the paucity of data effectively rendered these older determinations far less reliable. Wolf was the first to note the possible existence of the sunspot record of a longer modulation period of about 55 years. And on the next page, we have several graphs. I'm going to switch this around so you can see it. So here are several graphs. They're titled Figure of Historical Sunspot Observation. And on the left side of each graph, I believe, is the number of sunspots. Yes, number of sightings, I should say. and that's labeled over here on the right side, number of sightings, and down on the bottom is the year. So we start in 1610, and it looks like we don't have very good data, but there is a period from 1610 to around 1720 when it seems like there's not many sunspots. And then we go back to more sunspots and what we consider a more regular pattern of sunspots, though here's a little dip in the action. But these are going on an 11-year cycle. Every 11 years, the cycle repeats itself. Each of these bumps is about 11 years. Okay. And we can look at this when we see each other. There was something odd occurring in the accumulating data of historic sunspot observations. Johannes Hevelius noted the presence of numerous spots in 1644, and French Jesuit Jean Picard 1620 to 1682, and Jean-Dominique Cassini 1625 to 1712, at the Observatoire de Paris, newly founded by Louis XIV, saw one in 1671. But Wolf noted that very few sunspots were observed from about 1645 to 1715, and when they were seen, their presence was considered a noteworthy event by active astronomers. The dearth of sunspots, dearth means also a lack, the absence of, the dearth of sunspots seemed to be a real effect rather than the consequence of a lack of diligent observers. A simultaneous decrease in auroral counts further suggested that solar activity was greatly reduced during this time period. And I'm going to turn it around one more time so you can see the graphs. There they are. And I'm going to turn it around and say goodnight. Sleep tight, Devin. I love you. Don't let the chappies bite. Mwah, mwah, mwah.